Hey folks, Quill18 here, and welcome to 13 semi-hidden user interface tricks that you probably want to know for Crusader Kings 3, and you'll probably want to put into use on your next game. The first one is actually a big one. Did you know you can choose your child's education focus? Yeah, it's not super obvious. There's no pop-up letting you know that you can do it, because generally speaking, the game does the more or less right thing. It's not quite like Way of Life. You don't have as many options for education as you did in CK2, but it's still there. For any one of your children, and presumably any wards that you are educating, as long as they're at least 6 years old, you will be able to choose their education focus right over here on their character sheet. So this is my son here, my son Air, he's 11, and I can choose his focus. Now, every child, by the time they get to 6 years old, they will develop a childhood trait. While they're in childhood, this will give them +1 to 2 different stats. So my son here is curious, so he gets +1 to diplomacy and learning. But this also determines which education he would particularly excel at. In this case, a diplomacy education or a learning education. Both of these he would be quite good at because he is curious. You can see the note over here. The game will choose one of the two that your child would be good at based on his childhood trait. This is why you don't really need to interact with this. There's not a whole lot of options available, but you might still want to tweak it. For example, if we had particular aspirations for our son here to be kind of learning focused, we could go and switch over to that, hit choose focus, and there we go. So now he will get an education in learning. So when he comes of age, his education trait will be a learning focused one as opposed to a diplomacy one, which is what he had. He would do, because he's curious, he would be particularly bad at martial, although maybe we'd still have some reason to choose that because we had a particular plan in mind, or maybe because we want to sabotage our non-primary heir. These things can happen. Note that you can only choose your education focus one time, so you can make a change from the default pick one time, and then it is locked in. All right, next thing, and this is something else that a lot of people have asked about. Hey, can you move your capital in Crusader Kings 3? Absolutely. So right over here, this is all the counties that we control directly, and currently my capital is in Nancy, you can see, because of my glorious little flag over here. But I can switch my capital to any county that I control directly. For that, you're going to want to click on the county, specifically the barony, so not the bishopric, not the city, but the barony itself, which of course has our little blue marker over here. So this is one of the places I control, and we can see there's a little button right here, Move Realm Capital. Now, I believe we can only move your realm capital one time during your lifetime. So if I try to move it to Bree over here, I will not... Oh, that's the city holding. Sorry, right over here. There you go. I'm not able to move my realm capital over here. The exception is you should be able to move it back to your realm, your de jure realm capital, I believe, even if you have moved it. But I may be lying to you about that, because I thought this was the case. Hold on. What is my primary title? De jure capital is the county of Luxembourg over here. Oh, which I don't control. Okay, that might be it. I think you can always, even if you've already moved your capital one time, I think you can always move it to your de jure capital location. I might be lying to you about that, but I'm pretty sure it is the case. Unfortunately, turns out we don't control it. Fair enough. All right, next one, very powerful trick, the outliner. In every Paradox game, there is an outliner. Well, most Paradox games, there is an outliner, and it is a really potent tool. In Crusader Kings 3, it's here in the top right corner, just under your domain limit. There's a little scroll over here. And I usually play most Paradox games with the outliner opened all the time. It's incredibly convenient. You can show and hide these categories here. And in Crusader Kings 3, you can have your domain holdings, which is really useful because one thing you can do is you can use this to quickly jump between your different territory. Especially useful if it might be spread out, for example. So these are the 3 counties that I control directly, and I can go through. If you are building something, so if I was constructing a building in one of these, you'd actually see a progress bar behind the domain holding over here, which is really nice because then you can tell when the construction is finished, and maybe you want to start some new construction after that. If you have any armies raised, they will also show up in the outliner like this, and it's really quick. You can just click them over here to select them. Very handy dandy. You'll also notice there's a section here for pinned characters, which brings me to point number 4 on my video here. On any character in the game, there's a little button to pin this character. Let's say for some reason, Count Gerhard over here is someone I really want to keep an eye on. For some reason. Maybe he's a rival and someone I'm looking to murder later on. Maybe there's some child with great congenital traits somewhere in the game, and I want to keep an eye on them to maybe marry to my heir at some point in the future or something like that. Basically, I just want to bookmark these people and keep track of them. Hit the pin button over here. Now all of a sudden they show up on the outliner. And then no matter what I'm doing, I can go and click here, pull up their character sheet on demand. And you can just go ahead and unpin them that way as well. Really, really useful tool and built into the outliner. It's worth noting the outliner will stay open generally as you do things, but every now and again, it will go away. If I hit escape to bring up the main menu and I hit escape again, the outliner is gone. I consider this a slight UI bug that will hopefully get straightened out because I always want the outliner open. I don't want anything to close it accidentally somewhere along the way. So hopefully we can get a little adjustment on that, but it's not really a big deal now, is it? Now, what is a big deal? The Barbershop. On your character, and in fact, any character in your immediate family, as far as I can tell, if you right-click on your character to bring up your diplomacy screen, there's a little button in here. There's also the pin, right? This is another way you can pin characters in this pop-up. But there's a button here to open the Barbershop. I think those are a couple of clippers or some shears or something like that. And this allows you to change the look of your character. Now, everything here is set by default, which means your clothing, for example, will change based as you change ranks. It'll also change based on your culture and things like that if you have it on default. But there's no reason you can't override it. For example, if we decide we would like to be wearing a nightgown, we can totally do that. Or maybe we want Byzantine armor. Ooh, very shiny. I like that. Change our gear. We can go no headwear. Maybe we don't like wearing a helmet. We can go full Byzantine. We can pretend. We can change our beard as well. Let's get a pointy beard going on. Excellent. I like that. And for our hair, we'll have unkempt hair. And you know what? Let's go with white hair here. We can go and apply the change, and we look very, very different. I can also do this for my spouse. I can also do this with my children as well. It's also worth noting that for other people in your court, so this is one of my vassals. I do not have the Barbershop option, but there are multiple mods on the Steam Workshop that enable the Barbershop tool for all characters. There's also a lot of mods out there that give you extra options in your Barbershop. So take a look at the Steam Workshop community and search for things like Barbershop, for example, and you'll find a multitude of mods that do a bunch of different things. And if you're someone who really cares about the appearance of your character, or maybe all of the characters on your council, hey, give them all a makeover. All right, next thing we're going to talk about, and thing number 6, is the ability to add laws. Now, most of you at this point should know that if you go into realms, you can change your crown authority. You can also change your succession laws over here. But there's actually another place where you can modify your laws that is not quite as obvious. If you click on any title of the game, so let's say we go ahead and click on the Kingdom of Lothringia over here, but it works perfectly fine with duchies and counties as well, yeah. There's a little button down at the bottom of the screen, so when you're looking at a title, which by the way, you can rename it, right? This can be the Kingdom of Awesome. And you can change your adjective as well, but there you go. This is the Awesome Kingdom. You can add laws. So we can change some specific succession laws over here. Now, this applies only to this one title. Over here, this is the laws of, for all titles in the realm. Adding this succession law is to this specific title by itself. So only the kingdom title. It wouldn't change how the duchies and counties get passed out, for example. You can change your gender preferences. You can also enable various elective laws, for example. If you're wondering where the election law options were, they're in here. And so you can use this in combination with your realm succession. You can add title succession to various things to maybe have a little bit more fine control over your titles. I don't have any specific advice for this. This is still being worked out by a lot of people, is what kind of shady tricks you can pull with this. Do be sure to check probably the subreddit and the wikis and things like that. People have probably come up with all sorts of really interesting ideas that you can do by adding specific succession laws to specific titles. Next up, Men-at-Arms level up. Okay, so the Men-at-Arms is a function that a fair amount of people have probably discovered at this point. Men-at-Arms are a very powerful function of this game. They're a little similar to retinues in CK2. These represent more permanent armies rather than just peasants that you give pointy sticks to, right? That's what your levies are. They're mostly peasants you give pointy sticks to and send them off to war. So these are slightly more professional soldiers, but they're quite powerful, as well as adding to the quality of your army. They do cost money to set up. Now, you do have a men-at-arms limit. The amount that you can have is based on your rank. So as a king here, we can have 4. But it's not quite as clear-cut as it seems. If I go and raise some light footmen here, so I'm going to go ahead and recruit them. There we go. I don't know why I wasn't clicking. I think it thought it was on a tooltip. So I now have this regiment of men-at-arms. You can see I'm now 1 of 4. So I could build 3 more. But in addition to that, there's not really any reason. Let's say I wanted more light footmen. I could go and create another one. but that would bring me to 2 of 4 of my limit. The other thing you can do, which I didn't realize for a long time, is you can actually level up or increase the size of your men-at-arms. So currently, my light footmen are at size 1 of 3. I could level them up to size 2. It would double their size, double the maintenance, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's the same as buying 2 spearmen, right? If I create another light footman here, it costs me another 50, and I get another 100 spearmen. If I increase this one to size 2, it costs me 50, I get another 100 spearmen. So it's exactly the same, except it doesn't count towards my limit of 4 men-at-arms. I can level this light footman up all the way up to size 3, so it'd be a size 3 of 3 for this unit, and it would still only count as 1 of 4 men-at-arms. So when you're creating new regiments, generally speaking, you're hitting this button to add a regiment of a type you don't already have. If you just want more of something you've already got, just level up the one that you've got already. Very convenient and not something that I saw right away, and I think that's the case for a lot of people based on what I've seen in Twitch chat. So really potent option over here. Next up, assigning a physician. So a lot of people have seen, if you click on court, you've got the ability to go looking for a court physician. Now, whether you hit search for physician or whether you hit this plus button over here, it's a shortcut to the same thing, which is a shortcut to the same thing. If you go to decision menu, you go down here and search for physician. So firing this event will, after a certain period of time, give you a pop-up with an option between 2 different people that you could recruit to your court, and those people will be guaranteed a certain amount of learning, which is one of the most potent stats for assigning a physician. So that'll be there. But you can assign someone who's already in your court to be your physician. And you can do that by right-clicking on their portrait and bringing up the diplomacy screen. You're going to say, what are you talking about? I don't see a thing that says assign physician. Well, it's way down here under vassalage and court. If you click on one more here, you can see you can appoint anyone in your realm as a court physician, or anyone who's in your court, or, yeah, so vassals, as far as I know, you can assign pretty much anyone who's in your court in any way to be your physician, as long as they're an adult. So you can click that, and there we go. It still costs you 10 to assign it. They are happy with you. It's a good way to boast a relationship, and you can appoint them as a court physician. Court physicians do develop a trait that tells them how good they are as a physician, and they will generally level that up over time. So you might be incentivized to grab someone who's fairly young to be your court physician. She's not actually a good court physician at all because she only has a learning of 2. So if you've got someone who's got good learning and is fairly young, they might be the ideal person to be your physician for the next 50, 60 years, because it gives them plenty of opportunity to develop that skill. So you can assign a physician that way, which is great. Next up, negotiate release of prisoners. So this, I mean, most people will know most things over here. So if you click on your court here and you go to your prisoners tab, it'll show you all your prisoners. Now, there are some short buttons over here. Ransom, negotiate release, and execute. Ransom's pretty straightforward. If they have money, if they have a liege that can pay for their ransom, you will have the option of asking for money. In this case, Gillum over here doesn't have a liege who has any money. In fact, I'm his jailer, which is why, so I can't offer his ransom, but I could release him. So yeah, I'm his liege and his jailer. I could release him for a hook. Now, that is the ransom button. And a lot of people, I think, haven't necessarily spent a lot of time with the negotiate release button, but it is incredibly powerful. So there's a few different ways that you can release characters. So here, if I just release as is, which I think is what most people assume this button is just to release them and not get anything out of it. And it doesn't sound very exciting. And indeed, that's true. In fact, you will lose dread by just releasing someone from prison, but they will like you a little bit more. In Crusader Kings 2, this was a really powerful way to get all vassals to like you, but they have nerfed that slightly in Crusader Kings 3. However, you don't have to just release them as is. There's some other buttons you can do. Rather than just release them and have them like you a little bit more, and losing some dread, you could release them and gain a weak hook. Because we're not releasing them for nothing, we no longer lose dread, and we also don't get an opinion boost, we actually get an opinion penalty, but we will have a hook on this character, which might be useful. If they were not of your religion, you can also demand their conversion. If you have the right kind of religion and the right kind of relationship, you can also have people take the vows to become a monk or a nun, and then they wouldn't get married, they wouldn't have kids, they'd be pulling themselves out of the line of succession. You can also recruit them to your court. So if someone has really good stats and you might want to turn them into a knight or something like that, you might want to recruit them and bring them to your court. Be careful though, because of course, if they don't like you very much, they might cause problems when they're in the court. And in addition to that, you can hit more than one of these buttons. So they may not accept it. In fact, this character here is not willing to accept a weak hook in exchange for release. He's just not going to do that, so he wouldn't accept. Yeah, of course, he'd accept just being released as is. Turns out this guy would also accept release in exchange for joining my court. Sometimes you can hit many of these buttons depending on exactly how people feel about you and their particular traits and things like that. You might be able to hit several of these buttons. I'm pretty sure I had one person, I had them convert, gained a hook, and then recruited them as well because they had crazy good martial stats and became a fantastic knight of the realm once they followed the one true religion, which was whatever religion I happen to follow. Notify when decision is the next thing I want to talk about. When you're looking at the decision menu over here, so some decisions you get reminded of in the issues screen over here, which is a really powerful screen. I'm assuming most people know about the issues here. It's a great way to track things that aren't critical. So the things that are critical show up as these red flags, like, hey, I don't have a lifestyle chosen. Yeah, that's pretty critical. Things under issues are not critical, but they're still pretty handy, so you want to check on this fairly often when you can. You can also have decisions show up in this list. So, for example, if it was really important for me I want to be able to host a feast whenever. Let me know when I can host a feast. If I pull open this decision here, there's a little check mark down here. If I fill this in, I will be told when this decision is available, which in this case is when it's not on cooldown, and as long as I have 200 gold, it'll tell me this, and it'll show up in this issues list. Now, I can't hold a feast right now because it's not, I don't meet those requirements, so it's not going to show up. But I could go on a pilgrimage. Let's say I click this, and then I say notify when this decision becomes available. If I do this, notice my number of active issues went from 10 to 11. If I click here, and I scroll down, I have a little note here letting me know I can go on a pilgrimage. So for things that are really important for you to be able to do whenever you can or as soon as possible, you might want to go and hit this check mark. So now I can prepare for the journey, and what's nice is in 15 years, when my pilgrimage cooldown comes up, it'll once again remind me about that. And some of these reminders you may not care about. For example, you're getting told constantly you can create a cadet branch. If you don't particularly care about that, I mean, you can go and dismiss some of these notes over here. So if you do that, you can dismiss and then they don't show up anymore. You can always hit this reset to return any things you've dismissed. But for create a cadet branch, maybe you never want to do it. Maybe you don't care about it at all. So you can just uncheck this and it will no longer show up as a reminder. So we're no longer being told that we can create a cadet branch. Creating cadet branches are kind of awesome, so maybe you want to do it, but just so you know, there you go. All right, next up, filters for searching for spouse. This is actually it's not super hidden, but there's a couple of notes that I want to make over here. When you're searching for someone's potential spouse, so let's say we're looking for a potential spouse for my son and heir over here, there is a filter button on the left-hand side. So if you open this up, you can filter for different things. For example, you might want to filter to only show me people that have inheritable positive congenital traits. So by doing this, we're only seeing people who are intelligent or beautiful. There's Eudokia over here, who's got both quick and genius somehow, which is awesome. She's going to get married a lot, I think. Anyway, so that's a really good way to quickly filter for that. What's important to note about these filters is they don't reset. If I go, if this is a few years later, I'm trying to arrange for someone else, let's say Princess Bertha over here, and I'm trying to arrange a spouse, over here it's only going to show me characters that have inheritable traits because the filters doesn't get reset. Now, in the case of this, hey, it's not so bad. Probably, oftentimes you do want to marry someone with inheritable traits, but not always, and you might be losing out on people in this list you might not know about. So you're going to want to make sure when you pull up one of these menus, you're going to want to make sure to pull over your filters and make sure you're happy with it. Maybe reset to default. That's not so relevant with the traits, but it can be really relevant with other things. For example, for some reason you might have put in a maximum age, which makes sense with one character, but then later on when you're looking for a spouse for someone else, and the maximum age filter is still there, you might really be only seeing inappropriate actions for whatever you're doing. Mostly this has been a problem for me when I have switched the fertility filter to infertile, because I want to marry someone in a way that they won't have kids. Maybe it's myself, maybe I've got, enough kids I don't need anymore, because it'll cause too many problems in my realm. My spouse just died, so I want to marry someone new, but I want them to be infertile for some reason. So either they're going to have traits that prevent them from having kids, or they're just too old or something like that. But if you forget about this and then you're looking for a spouse for your heir and you accidentally marry them to someone who they're going to be infertile with, well, that would be pretty terrible. So do make sure, if you set this filter, to reset that. And that's mostly the warning for that tip over there. Make sure to reset. Okay. So you can search for spouses this menu, but there are other ways to look for characters. Down over here, there is a find character and a find title function. And most people are aware of this, but one may not be aware of the shortcut key. Because weirdly enough, if I mouse over find title, it tells me the shortcut key for this is V. But for find character, which you use a lot more, for some reason, it doesn't currently in the tooltip have a note about the shortcut key, which is C. C for character. And C and V are right next to each other, and they're the two find things, and that's how I remember it. So C brings up the character finder. I use the character finder all the time, and so it's great to know that there's a shortcut key for it. So C is the key. And you can use this to find anyone, anywhere in the world, especially if you set this to all. You can find people of any description for whatever purpose you might be looking for. The final thing we're going to talk about here is down in this menu is the Encyclopedia, which I think a lot of people haven't really looked for. Everything you can find out in the game from a tooltip, you can also find in the Encyclopedia. But it might be nice to browse this, especially depending on what you're looking for. You can also search, like if I want to find out everything about maybe Succession, for example, I can search for that. It'll bring up everything that's got Succession in the name. And of course, this still has tooltips, so you can still work your way through these tooltips just like everything before. So if you've got any questions about Crusader Kings 3 and some of the game rules, the Encyclopedia is a great way to do it, and we'll cover things that aren't covered in tutorial or aren't covered necessarily by every single one of these types of videos. So there you go, 13 semi-hidden user interface tricks that hopefully will give you a little bit more power and potency in Crusader Kings 3. In particular, I know that when I posted about it, a lot of people were excited about the fact that you can choose an education focus for your children, again, because it's not really advertised. Not that there's a lot to necessarily do here, but there are going to be times when you're probably going to want to tweak that, and so it's nice to know you can do that. So, and that was kind of the inspiration for the video, is everyone's reaction about that feature. I was like, all right, I better make a video about that. And okay, well, I probably should make a video about more than just one thing. So here we go, 13 things. Hopefully will help you in Crusader Kings 3. If you're new to the channel, of course, subscribe. And if you've got any more questions, do leave them in the comments. Either myself or maybe people who are even better at me at this game will be able to answer those questions for you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.